Hi everyone, I'm joined again today by the wonderful Jensen from Australian Nutrition Centre. Hi James, how are you?
Hello, thanks for having me.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, thank you. Same to you.
It's always good to reconsider our pantry cupboard at the beginning of the new year, would you say?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
A lot of stock taking going on in my house at the moment. What about yours?
Yeah, well, there's not much left over. So, yeah, which is the right way to start the year.
That's really cool. So I wanted to have a chat with you at the beginning of 2022, and we're going to talk a little bit about resetting our gut health. I'm keen for people to understand the difference between prebiotics and probiotics, complaints that you may have had from patients throughout 2021 generally, and then what health trends you've noticed for the year to come. And then really, if you could share any tips you've got for sticking to task with good nutrition, that would be great.
Sure. How long do we have? Okay.
I know I could talk to you all year about this. We'll have to do this every week.
Yeah.
I've signposted a lot of people to your door over the last 6 months with varying ranges of, kind of complaints and illnesses and everything. And what I've learned, which I'm sure you've heard as well, that Socrates that said that all disease starts in the gut, right?
Yes. Yes.
So
That's very true.
on that note, shall we start with, let's talk a bit about gut health, resetting our gut and benefits and how and why and any insights you have. So I'll just let you talk to us for a bit.
Sure. Okay. So yeah, as you rightly pointed out, all disease begins in the gut, and it really is the foundation for health because if you understand that, it's one of the sort of things that I'll say to people is that, it's how you get good things in and it's how you get bad things out. So if your gut's not working properly, you won't get all the nutrients or the benefits of your nutrition. And also if your gut's not working properly, you won't get the toxins out. So, sometimes it's a bit like having a dirty kitchen that you never clean up and you can't use it properly and you never take the rubbish out. So everything gets a bit toxic and a bit yucky. And, really when you understand how hormones work and mood and energy and all those things, it really is greatly influenced by the gut. So it can really be the Achilles heel if it's not quite right.
Mm-hmm. And that's interesting you mentioned about toxicity because we get a lot of toxicity build up in our body. And we've also talked in the past about melatonin and serotonin being produced in the gut and how that impacts our sleeping cycles as well as our mood and so on and so forth. So can you share some insights there?
Yeah, so most people are pretty, they're sort of surprised to hear that a good sort of 80 to 90% of your serotonin is actually made in the gut. Again, we talk about, the gut being the second brain, and that stands to good reason. Again, there's different sort of Chinese medicine clocks where they look at where people are having trouble with sleeping, and that can give a few clues. But often, you're talking about the serotonin to melatonin sort of conversion. So often people that have poor gut health will struggle to convert serotonin to melatonin. And also, understanding that the gut, it's 2 football fields worth of surface area. So if you've got a little bit of inflammation in your gut, you can imagine, if you've got that massive surface area of inflammation, how that sort of affects everything. So inflammation can halt the conversion of serotonin to melatonin. So that's why you can see people that have, anxiety or depression or sleeping trouble just from a dodgy gut. It's not so much that they're kept awake going, oh, my tummy's grumbling, or, I feel sick or whatever. It's more to do with the inflammation and the way it's all working.
And so for lay people, we know that serotonin is the happy hormone, right?
Correct.
So if we're not
Yes.
producing the happy hormone, we won't feel happy, and it's produced in the gut. What are some and melatonin is the sleep hormone, which we need to have restful sleep.
Yes.
And what are the indicators then of toxicity in the gut that you mostly see?
Well, I guess, there's your usual things like people might have, feeling gassy or bloated or constipated or diarrhea. And some people have all the above all in the space of, half a day.
Mm-hmm.
There can be some less obvious signs like, acne or skin blemishes. as well. Again, some people just often people that have chronic gut issues, you can kind of sort of put it to one side and they become quite disconnected from their gut.
Mhm.
So, I'll start talking to them about their gut, and then all of a sudden they might say initially, oh, there's not too much going on, but then once you start asking questions, they go, oh, is that not normal for this to happen? So, if they've been long-term sufferers, I guess they can become a little bit blind to or lack the insight into just sort of some of the symptoms and how they may not be sort of normal, even if they are common.
And what tests can you have done to check your gut health?
So I guess there's a combination of things like microbiome mapping. So it's basically like looking at all the different gut bugs that are there. We do a microbiome map with people through a company called Nutripath, which is about $350, and that looks at a whole range of things, from parasites, yeast, and bacteria. It looks at all the good bugs and the bad bugs. It also looks at levels of digestive enzymes and things like that. So it's a really nice snapshot, as to how the gut's working. And I think it's important because when you do like a standard sort of stool sample with say the doctor, say you've got diarrhea and they're like, oh, let's test your gut, we'll do a stool sample. They're only really specifically looking for maybe 5 or 6 bugs or parasites. So if you've got an overgrowth of something completely different, it might be causing symptoms, but it may not show up on a test like that. And with the microbiome map, it gives you an idea of scale or quantity versus, like a normal, like say you're testing for Giardia. The test just says you either have it or you don't have it.
Mhm.
It doesn't tell you if you have 50,000 or just 50.
Mhm.
So I think doing a microbiome map's a really nice, important one.
Well,
There
that's
are
really
other,
interesting. Can you just
yeah.
give us a layperson's definition of microbiome? What is it?
Yeah, so your microbiome, if you want to think of it like a lawn, it's basically all your, if you think of the lawn as or the types of grasses as your bacteria. So your microbiome is all the different bugs that are inside that gut, and you can have different variations. So if you've got a little bit of buffalo grass, a little bit of cooch, a few weeds in there as well. And, some people's lawn looks beautiful if it's got, lots of buffalo and nice green grass, where other people might have lots of weeds and things like that. So, yeah.
And dog wee patches.
Yes. Yes. Big
Um,
holes.
Big holes and very patchy. Yeah, that's funny. So talk to me about the difference then between prebiotics and probiotics and how they can support gut health.
Sure. So prebiotics is typically the food that a probiotic or a bacteria would eat. So, well, think all like your fibers. So everything that you're eating to some degree is a prebiotic,
Mm-hmm.
and the probiotic is the bacteria or the organism itself.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're taking a probiotic capsule, for example, that's the bacteria, and a prebiotic would be the fiber. So, someone that's eating lots of fruit, veggies, all those things, they're technically eating prebiotics.
Mm-hmm. So sweet potato is a good prebiotic, isn't it?
Yeah. So your more fibrous or starchy type of carbs, or what we call complex carbs, contain more prebiotics typically.
Mm-hmm. What are other good prebiotics?
Foods wise,
Yes.
well, I'm a little bit I suppose not the technical definition of prebiotics, but herbs and spices and the skins and rinds of fruits and things like that. They, if you imagine like a fruit, so the outer skin, let's use apple as an example. So apple peel. So the outside of an apple has that sort of bitter sort of taste to it compared to the inside, the nice fleshy part. So the bitter part is rich in polyphenols.
Mm-hmm.
And what polyphenols do is they feed good bugs and typically poison bad bugs.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes sense. If you had an apple that had nice thick skin that was rich in polyphenols, it's going to be a lot more resistant to pests and bugs.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to like eating it. So when you sort of look at when I think of prebiotic that's good for the gut, I think more about herbs and spices and all those things that sort of modify the microbiome, as opposed to just, if you've got here's another sort of analogy. If you've got a lawn full of weeds and you throw fertilizer on there, you're just going to get more weeds.
Okay.
So sometimes, when someone's not eating so well and they've developed lots of dodgy bugs, and then they start cleaning their diet up and eating more fresh fruit and veggies, if they have an overgrowth of dodgy bacteria or bugs, all those extra fibers can often feed that overgrowth, and they can sometimes feel worse. And they say, see, I told you this healthy thing is no good for me.
Yes. Interesting. So how do you
Yeah.
push reset then? What do you do?
So, this sort of time of year is normally where we see more of this happening. So we will look to do, we often use a product called Gut Right, which is basically a blend of all those polyphenols. So the polyphenols will feed good bugs and crowd out and poison off the dodgy ones. And we do that combined with more specific carbs. So they have less complex carbs, so less of those prebiotic fibers. That way you're sort of not feeding those bugs while you're trying to get rid of them. So it's not to say that some of the complex carbs are bad for you. I mean, often we recommend them. But when you're doing a gut reset, again, to use a lawn analogy, I'm going to sound like a gardener now, but if you're trying to poison weeds while it's raining, it just doesn't work. So that's the same way that we'll often clean the diet up and we'll stick to more specific carbs. And for anyone that's sort of listening, they can look up what is called a specific carb diet. And that gives a very clear picture of what you can and can't eat to do that. So you can do the specific carb diet, and then we can use the polyphenols, and that will be a nice gut reset. And we can normally do that over sort of a week to 2 weeks.
No, so it's not a long period of time.
No. To fully heal and reset the gut from a really bad gut to get it into what we can consider a great gut can take up to 3 months, but some people can do it much, much faster.
That's good. So it's good to know that you could do it quite quickly. And then also that feeds into all other aspects of your health and well-being, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like we're saying, it's, the gut really is the foundation of health. And if it is, it's almost always the first place we will start. Yeah.
And what about things like the super green drinks that you get for prebiotics? Do you recommend those?
Yeah, again, it depends. Some people will say, oh, whenever I drink the super greens, I feel sick. And that's a dead giveaway to me that they might have a problem with their microbiome.
Right.
So I guess, unfortunately, I'm one of those people that always says it just depends. It just depends on the individual. But typically those fibers that they put in there, they don't put too many in there, and they're generally really well tolerated. And to answer your question, yes, I'm a fan.
You're a fan. I'm a fan. How long does it take to get the microbiome map back?
So the company we use is based in Victoria. So the process usually is that we'll order the test kit. The person will pay for it. It gets shipped express. So they'll receive the test kit usually within a day or two. And then it takes about 2 weeks for them to sift through your poo and tell you what you're made up of. So yeah, we usually allow for up to 3 weeks from where to go.
Okay, so 3 weeks for a map. But you can be doing proactive things during that time. You're not waiting.
Yeah. And when we're talking about doing a gut health reset, if someone comes to me with a dodgy gut, I'll often do that reset first before I do any testing.
Right.
Because if they've got a dodgy gut and, we do a test, I won't be so surprised if it comes back with, you have a dodgy gut microbiome. Yes. So I try and do as much work to fix it first.
Yes.
I usually reserve the microbiome map for people where we're really not sure, or if they don't quite fit into a box. I guess it's the second thing that I would do, and especially because costs can be prohibitory.
Yeah. And what do you put down to the main causes of poor gut health? In addition to just poor dietary choices.
Yeah. So stress, I would say, we talk about, I say, gut can make or break you, but so can stress.
Yeah.
And because one of the reasons is that stress, if you're too high stressed, or sort of anxious all the time and always in a state of worry or survival, that switches off the vagus nerve, which regulates digestion. So then you don't engage digestion properly, which means you don't get enough digestive enzymes. If you don't get enough digestive enzymes, you're not sterilizing your gut properly and you're not breaking food down. And then that can lead to more overgrowth and imbalance. So usually, as part of treating someone, I'll try and go through a bit of a timeline. They might present with a dodgy gut now, but I'll say, when did this all start unfolding? And they might say, oh, I had a job that I hated and I was stuck in it for 2 years or 6 months or whatever it is. They said, ever since then, I've started to notice. Or it might lead back to like a course of antibiotics or something like that. So yeah, I would say the most common cause for a dodgy gut, other than inheriting it from your parents.
Yes, I want to ask you about that specifically in a moment.
Yeah.
Carry on with what you're saying.
Yeah, would be, definitely stress.
So I've read and listened to a lot of talks the last 12 months about the fact that mothers particularly pass gut health on to their children. And often children who are born through cesarean or those that are born prematurely have much higher risk of poor gut health than those that are full-term born through the birth canal. Is that something that you understand as well?
Yeah. And it used to be all sort of doom and gloom, and any sort of mother that, for whatever reason, either elected to or was forced to have a cesarean was sort of like, oh no, I've compromised my child's health for the rest of, and there used to be a lot of guilt attached to that. But some of the newer sort of studies are showing that, yes, whilst it's not the same start to life, that usually within that sort of first year to 2 years, that, children's guts are pretty well similar. So yes, it's not a surprise to learn that kids in their early sort of stages of life, that first sort of 6 to 12 months, if they didn't get that good start from a gut point of view, whether it be through cesarean or lots of antibiotics, for example, sometimes I'll see mothers that were placed on antibiotics in their last trimester or throughout their pregnancy. Obviously that will compromise the gut health. But the good news is, you can sort of catch that up quite easily.
Yeah, because my girls were both born by cesarean at 36 weeks because I had a severe pregnancy illness, which means if they stayed in longer than 36 weeks, their rate of mortality increased tenfold. So obviously it was a goal to get them out and to keep them alive. But I know, I've worked with my eldest particularly. I think I've noticed a lot of challenges with eating as a result of all of that. The second one, not so much. But because I'm now conscious of this fact that, it's also down to my knowledge now of helping to, build their immunity, help them have a healthy gut, so on and so forth. There are some practical things I can do, but it's also to understand that how that would have impacted their sleeping and their digestion and so on and so forth, which I think is information that's not readily provided when you're a new mum to a child who happens to be born prematurely through, lots of different reasons and things that you may encounter as a result of that. And we know that, instances of autism and ADHD are on the rise, and there's always talk around why those things are. But often some of those brain issues are also linked to gut health. Is that what you found as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we talked about neurotransmitters like serotonin made in the gut, but a lot of them are made in the gut. And as we said, the gut is the second brain. There's a very strong communication between the brain and the gut, and it's a two-way street. So again, if the microbiome is not quite right, that can easily signal to the brain. Again, most people have found that if they might feed their kids too much sugar or too much junk food and their behavior deteriorates. And, that's a really sort of obvious example of how, your food will dictate your microbiome, and the microbiome will dictate the neurochemistry. So yeah, it's not a surprise to learn that, I guess the future of healthcare, and especially mental health type things, are are going to be centered around gut health.
I was refreshed recently to meet head of psychiatry from our local hospital who's specifically doing research into microbiome and psychiatric conditions and how things are linked. So that's positive.
Yes.
And I know that you're considered a bit of a baby maker yourself. So how are you managing to make so many babies in your professional life, not just your personal life?
Yeah. Well, I guess one of the things that I think I'm willing to do that might be a little bit different is that I look at all the information that's presented to me. I mean, too often we can get focused on whether, someone's ovulating or not. Whereas, I guess baby making is more complicated than what maybe some people think and consider. And unfortunately, in some people's instances, it's all too easy.
Yes.
But
damn those people that make babies easily.
Yeah. It's funny because you spend, as a teenager, you spend your whole time avoiding pregnancy, and then you might decide that you finally want one, and then you struggle. You're like, oh gosh, if I knew it was that, bloody hard, I would have tried earlier. But I guess what I'm getting at is with fertility, it comes to looking at lots of small little things as opposed to one big thing. And in the typical fertility context, when you're seeing specialists, they're typically more focused on like looking for major issues, like, is there, a blocked tube, or, are we ovulating or whatever. So whereas I'll look at things like, stress, microbiome, egg quality, all those. I sort of try and factor all those things in and work on the 1%ers, because typically it's about 25% chance if everything is perfect. So if you have 2 or 3 like 1%ers that go against you, that makes a very significant impact. So if it's a matter of like lowering stress hormones, improving a bit of gut health, getting some of these basic nutrients right, it usually is the trick. And I say to people all the time, it just comes down to the basics. As simple as it sounds, it really is just about getting the basics right. And too often, if you've got someone with a little bit of vitamin D deficiency, or their iron's a little bit low, the body might decide, it says, hey, now's not a good time for me to have a baby. So it's got its own little, cross checks that it will do, that'll say, look, you know what, mum's a bit stressed, a little bit nutrient depleted, I don't think now's a good time. So if we fix all those little 1%ers, that's, inevitably, and fingers crossed, it continues to help people conceive.
Yeah, it's true. And I could do a whole video just on my experience with all of that. But we won't go there today. So what main complaints have you seen from your patients in 2021, just generally?
Sure. Well, not so surprisingly, it hasn't really changed over the time that I've been practicing. But, like stress and anxiety is always one that sort of is there for a lot of people. Thyroid is probably something that is increasing. And I'm also guilty of seeing a bit of a bias, because once you're good at something, you tend to see more and more people for those things. So, fertility is a common one that I see. Again, we've spoken about digestion and menopause. So menopause is, the trends that I'm seeing are, everyone's too stressed, too anxious, their guts aren't good, they're having period or menstrual problems, menopause type symptoms. So yes, it's yeah, like I said, I'd like to think that it will change in the future, but I'm not sure.
Well, let's hope so, because what do you think the health trends might be for the year to come then?
Well, the last sort of 6 months, I've seen a sort of massive uptick in people really interested in immune health. So, I mean, obviously it's quite topical, but with COVID around, people are very interested in how they can bolster their immune system. And then with that, obviously comes, getting the basics right. So, again, immune system is really in part a representation of the overall health. So people are wanting to, they're wanting to lose weight. They're wanting to, do whatever they can, whether it be to take stuff or work on other aspects of their life. stress, for example, that high level of cortisol, which is the stress hormone, that will suppress immune function. So with people, maybe it's not that they need to increase their immune system, we just need to remove the handbrakes from it.
That's interesting. That cortisol is a big barrier to having a healthy immune system, isn't it?
Yeah. And again, like to make it all sort of come back to the gut. The gut really is, a good 80 or 90% of your immune system sits in the gut as well.
Mm-hmm.
So getting your gut right will help.
Is that why
your
it's
immune
called
system.
gut? That's why it's called gut, right?
Well, I think so. Yeah, it kind of works, doesn't it?
And
Sometimes I feel like
how
I'm
much is that a jar? How much is a jar of gut, right?
It's $49.95.
Okay, so it's pretty affordable.
Yeah.
So what are your good tips or your main tips for sticking to task when it comes to kind of nutrition?
I think, well, for me, first and foremost, I think it's about setting a really clear intention as to why you're wanting to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's people that come to see me and they say, James, I want to lose weight. And I'll say, why? And they'll kind of look at me like, well, of course, I want to lose weight. Like, why else? And the reason is because if you don't have a very clear why, it makes it very difficult to stick to.
Mm-hmm.
So the why for some people might be that they're tired and they want to spend more time, energetically with their kids, or,
Mm-hmm.
Or that they feel depressed
Mm-hmm.
and they don't feel good about themselves. So
Mm-hmm.
if you don't have that clear intention set, it makes it very easy to go, oh, bugger it, I can't be bothered, or it's all too hard. So it's about reminding people about, well, helping them firstly discover what that why is, and then helping them sticking to their plan, by bringing it back to the why, because the why is very motivating for people. So if you go, well, actually, it's about spending more time in a healthy way for my kids, then that's very easy for people to go, you know what, I won't go off track because my why is really important to me. So I would say that would be the, sort of a big tip. And the other sort of thing that I always want to address with people is again, like the root cause. Excuse me. So if people start a diet but they find it difficult to stick to, they might go, oh, look, I don't know why I can't stick to it. I just can't. And I'll go, well, do you think it is because you're tired? And then we sort of start unpacking that. Oh, yes, maybe I am tired. So sometimes I don't start with, like a specific eating plan. I'll stick with getting them to feel good, because if you feel good, it's much easier to stick to a plan.
Yeah.
It's when you feel lousy and tired and run down that it's like, oh, you know what? I'm too tired to cook dinner. I'll just go and get whatever.
Yes.
Or, you know what? I'm emotionally exhausted. I just need a drink, or whatever it is. So, yeah. So I think fixing the root cause.
That's really powerful, because, we talk about New Year's resolutions, but, that clear why of your intention setting is really the fundamental foundation that you need in order to make any changes in your life. And you use the word basics a lot. And I think the basic things that we can do for ourselves on a daily basis are the things that make the biggest difference over time. We're just often not committed enough to the basics because we don't even understand our own why. Does that make sense?
That's right. Yes. Yeah. And I think understanding why we do different things. And, a lot of people, they often comment about why they find me useful would be because I actually take the time to explain why we're doing something.
Yes.
I can give them a plan, but if I explain why we're doing it and how it affects them, like most of us, if we understand the why, we find it easier to stick to. So yeah, it's a combination of things, and having a good mentor or health coach or someone to help guide and remind you of why you're doing what you're doing is really powerful as well.
I don't think it's about dumbing it down, but I think it's making it relevant in a really normal way. So you use the grass analogies and the gardening analogies. I think when you can bring it back to people that things that people can relate to in everyday life, it's much easier to absorb, because sometimes we over intellectualize certain aspects of health, which I think is really unhealthy.
Yeah, it gets very overwhelming. I mean, often if you might go to the doctor and they give you some complicated diagnosis, and if you bombard people with a whole heap of information that overwhelms them, they don't know where to start. So I think if we can, like we're talking about, it's powerful for people to understand. I mean, not everybody is a health expert, so if we can understand or try and use as many analogies as we can for people to get that grasp, they'll find it easy to stick to. And again, like you said, it's about basics. Sometimes we don't need to do everything they need to do straight away. We start with the things that are going to get them to that next step, and then to the next step, and you build that foundation. And once you've got that good solid foundation, you can do some of the the one percenters.
Where are you on bone broth?
Where am I? So bone broth's very good for the gut, and it typically depends on what's in there, but bone broth is usually full of things like glutamine. So glutamine is really good for healing the gut. So it's bone broth for me is more of a nice sort of gut healer and repairer. Yeah.
So I want to tell you something. I hope you're going to be really proud of me. Yesterday, I made bone broth from scratch.
I'm proud so far.
Thank you. And then to balance it out, I made some brownies.
Oh, good. Well, you can make some gut healthy brownies. Just put a little bit of fiber in there.
Yeah, I'll do that next time. But I was very pleased. I'm going to be sipping on bone broth today, which is my leftover lamb bones, chopped up root vegetables, some herbs and spices. It's going to be, and also the natural gelatin that comes out of the meat when you leave it sit in the fridge for a few days.
Yeah. So the herbs and spices are the polyphenols that work on the gut bugs. And the other nutrients are the things that are going to provide, the building blocks to heal the gut lining. So you've nailed it.
Thank you.
And if it tastes quite good, then that's another big tick.
I'll send you my review. I think it's going to be awesome. Well, thanks so much for catching up with me today. And I hope you're going to have a successful 2022.
I'm sure I will. Thank you very much for having me.
What did you want to share? What is one of your goals or intentions for 2022?
I suppose one of my intentions is to read more. Typically, my wife will attest to this. I accumulated probably 10 to 15 books that I was absolutely going to read, and I think I've turned the page on maybe one or two of them.
Okay.
So yeah.
Well,
I'm a massive podcast fan.
You could read them to your children.
Well, that's right. Yeah, we do have a book for the kids. I think it's called Mandy's Microbiome or something like that. My son actually enjoys it. So
that sounds fun. Yes, reading is good. Podcasts are good. Any kind of learning is good, particularly when it comes to your own health and well-being, because you start to feel really empowered when you know a few information that can support you.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, love to Emma and the kids. Happy New Year again, and I hope to see you real soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Chrissy. Bye.
Bye.